Welcome. This is Pastor Tim coming to you from Central Texas, from Bend and Lomita United Methodist Churches, churches that are remaining faithful to the United Methodist tradition. We're small churches in the Texas Hill Country, and we invite you to come and worship with us on Sunday morning, 9 o'clock on Facebook at Bend United Methodist Church, or to look at our webpage. But we are bringing you podcasts on the nature of the Bible, what the Bible has in it. We think that a lot of people know about the Bible, but not many people have read the Bible, and it's not an easy task, and we need some help getting started. And so we began with some great themes of the Bible, which were helpful in giving you the ideas, the overarching ideas of the whole book. But now we're getting into individual parts of the Bible. We gave a kind of an introduction last time, but we're going to talk about Genesis today. This is not a detailed scholarly presentation. It's just what I've drawn from many years of preaching and teaching, and what makes sense to me. So I hope it find it helpful to you if you're just beginning. We're not trying to start an argument or begin a discussion about what's right and what's wrong, but just a general idea of what Genesis is. Genesis, the very title means in the beginning. This means just the start. And it covers the early part of the history of the Jewish people, beginning all the way back to creation. Now, when I can imagine kids sitting around a campfire with their father one time and saying, or their mother, and saying, where did we come from? And they didn't try to give a scientific explanation. They didn't try to explain the history. They didn't try to explain geology. They said, let me tell you a story. There was a great-great-great-grandma Eve and great-great-great-grandpa Adam. And they began to tell a story. And so creation is spelled out not how or when, but by who. That all of creation was made by God, that it is not an evil in and of itself, that it is good, that what God created was good and is trustworthy, and that God is trustworthy. But they created all the animals, and then they created human beings. It came not trying to argue evolution or not. God can use any way he wants to create life, but this describes kind of the process, not a time span, but just the idea that God created all of life, and then he created human beings. I've always thought that God is love, and that love needs an object to love, to give that love. And so that's why God created human beings, even though that God knew that we were going to cause a lot of trouble for God. He talks about how the life was intended in the beginning in the garden, and then how human beings messed it up because we wanted to be like God. We wanted to be in control. We wanted to be in charge of our lives and thought we could do it better than God could do it. So we rebel against what God says to do, which was really for our good, for our own good. And they were separated from the garden because when they had to choose good from evil, sometimes they choose evil. We as human beings choose evil. And therefore we couldn't be where we would live for eternally, so that our evil would be everlasting. So we're limited in our time and space in the world. It describes a number of things, our relationship with each other, our relationship with nature. It comes out of that story of the garden. But then there are several other stories of human beings like Cain and Abel, who were the first brothers and committed the first murder because they were envious of one another. which describes a lot of what we do as human beings, and our envy and our tendency towards violence. It talks about Noah and the ark as an attempt not to destroy humanity, but in an attempt to save humanity. And it goes for 12 chapters talking about how we are so destructive and how we do in our relationship with one another and with God until Abraham and Sarah come along. God chooses them, not because they're special, because they're the least likely. I think God picks the people that are the least likely so you know that God does it. They were too old to have children, but God chooses them to be the father and mother of a great nation. And it talks about the history of that, which is a history of family, how they go into Egypt, which is a way of saving. Joseph came to power in Egypt as the second in command and provided a place for their family to live. And remember, they were nomadic people. They were living from place to place, and now they got to settle down, but it isn't going to turn out so well. So that's the story of Genesis is a story of how life all began. Not the way that it was created, not the biology, not the physics, not the history, not the geology, but the theology. It's who did it and who can be trusted. And God can be trusted. And God continues to be in relationship with us. But they're going to get into trouble when they get into Egypt. And there's always a sense of the outsider is being used and feared, and they end up being slaves. But we'll get into that with Exodus, which is a great story of the Hebrew Scripture that is a center of their faith and an important part of our faith as Christians as well. See you next time.